Welcome to We Get Real AF, everyone. This is Vanessa Alava, and we're here with Alisa Walters.
Hi.
And I'll let Sue introduce herself as well. Should we start
Hi,
over?
everybody.
I know we have a little intro for this one. Maybe I'm getting it mixed up. How about this? We'll just start from what we're going to get into.
Okay.
All right. Today we're covering what you need to do in order to grow in this remote environment in your career, what you should be doing. We talk a lot about career development here. This is what Profesh Sesh is all about. And this is a really unique time that we're living through. How do you continue to make those connections in virtual land on Zoom meetings? And what do you do if you're in a situation where maybe you were up for a promotion right before the pandemic hit and potentially you were promised a bump in pay or bonuses that never really happened because, companies were trying to keep people in the roles that they had and didn't want to downsize, understandably. So what are the next steps? Alisa, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think what we're all seeing is there's no shortage of jobs. And we keep hearing that it really is a candidates market. It's very much a candidates market where the world essentially is their oyster in many ways. And I think that it's really important to recognize that we're all dealing with this burnout, this Zoom fatigue, if you will, of being in that little square box. And how do you, when you're feeling the Zoom fatigue and you're feeling very isolated because you're in this remote environment? And I want to preface this by saying a lot of people thrive. I worked for a woman who was the head of my team who had been remote for 10 years and had consistently been able to grow her career in a fully remote capacity. So it's really how you manage your own time. You really have to prioritize and practice time management. You have to use structure in your day-to-day to stay efficient and to stay motivated. As much as the virtual meetings, we're all kind of burned out from all of them. It really is important to maintain virtual meetings. If there are people within your, if you're gunning for a promotion and you potentially that went on the back burner because of the pandemic, you have to speak up. You have to ask for what you want. And having those virtual meetings, having those one-on-ones with your direct boss. If there's somebody else that's that oversees your team that you might be a skip level to, find time to have that one-on-one. So many of people that have been in the leadership to me in my professional career have always offered that up. If they offer it up, take advantage of being able to have those conversations with somebody who may be your boss's boss, and so that they know you, they get to see what you're doing and get a sense of projects that you're working on, and that could lead to you taking on some additional responsibilities, which I encourage if you have the time and the bandwidth. If you are trying to grow and you are trying to expand within your current role, take on those additional responsibilities, raise your hand, but obviously within reason and what you can handle, as long as it's not going to impact your ability to do your job. It's not going to impact your mental health, your physical health. Take on those additional responsibilities. And I think that it's really important that you acquire new skills during this time. LinkedIn, again, we talk so much about LinkedIn on this page. Again, hi LinkedIn, we're here. There are so many courses that they offer for free that you can upskill yourself. Add those different types of certifications that you complete, whether it's LinkedIn or somewhere else. Add those things to your resume. Add those things to your LinkedIn profile. Your personal brand, when you are trying to advance in a remote environment, is also going to become, you really want to reflect on that. And there's a whole podcast that we've done, a whole episode of the Profesh Sesh that we talk about personal branding. So I encourage you to listen to it. But you want to look at your own personal brand, make sure your resume is up to date, your LinkedIn profile is up to date, that it includes the skills and the certifications that you're receiving. And then I think ultimately you use the network that you already have, the contacts that you have. If you're looking potentially for a growth opportunity outside of your current role, you start to put those feelers out there. You buy somebody that virtual coffee. and you start reaching out to new people. It's, for every 20 people that you might reach out to, somebody's going to say yes. It does take some skill, it does take some work, but if it's something that's important to you, you have to make the time to do it.
That's all such great advice, Alisa. And, it is looking like for many of us, we'll continue to be working in a virtual first environment for some time to come. So I just wanted to sort of underscore what you said about not just thinking about career advancement from a upward mobility standpoint, but also from a opportunity to move maybe laterally, to your point, learning new skills, maybe even taking a step back and thinking about maybe, is this the time where I want to make a career change? I think we have to kind of think creatively about career advancement and see that even with all the challenges that a virtual first environment presents, there's also opportunities to think differently and maybe try something completely new.
Definitely. And I'm thinking of this from just the perspective of keeping in touch with people that you really otherwise wouldn't be able to. Let's say they're not in your organization and you're not having these regular Zoom meetings or FaceTime with them. And obviously, the world is starting to open up again and certain people feel comfortable meeting in person, but others still don't be shy. Like reach out and just say, "Hey, it's been a long time just checking in. How are you? How's life? How's work?" It's very interesting what you hear from people when you do that. And it can feel out of the norm, especially for someone who's more of an introvert, but kind of take that um that luxury of having a screen between you as like that, icebreaker, like, "Hey, I'm not going up to them and asking them. I'm literally just sending a message saying, it's been a long time. Wasn't it a crazy year? Like, what are you up to?" And you could learn, hey, they've moved on. They're going to be a digital nomad for the next year. They're going to start their own business. Hey, that's us. So
Yes.
it's just like reach out. Like people really appreciate that. And that's keeping your network warm. That way, when things do ramp up for real, it's not starting cold again because you don't want that. And it's nice. It's nice to check in, right? It's the human thing to do.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You just made me think of something, Vanessa, I wanted to add on because my eldest daughter she's been in the travel industry and she's now really interested in archaeology and going on a dig and kind of making this big career pivot. And so she's reached out to some archaeology professors who have been really receptive and, just people that she's met virtually. So kind of take advantage of that too, like making new connections now, because I feel like we're all thinking a little bit differently as a result of
Yes.
this weird time that we've been. So kind of lean into that and make new connections too.
Yeah, the human connection and the making new connections is so important. And I think, you could reach out to somebody and have a conversation and do a check-in. And this other person, you don't know what that person might be so grateful for the fact that you've reached out and had that connection, because perhaps they were thinking of doing the same. It's alleviating some of the isolation a lot of people feel in this environment. And also, you never know what those conversations could lead to. Um,
Exactly.
and there's so many, there's opportunity to really make, that's how partnerships form. And you just having initial conversations and talking things out, you just never know where it's going to lead. And I think that, some people might ask, well, hey, I am an introvert and I do want to make a career pivot. What How do I, in this virtual environment, put myself out there to make those connections? And obviously we've mentioned the few of reaching out to people within your own network. We have a whole episode on LinkedIn and how you reach out to people on LinkedIn. But if there's a certain industry, if there's a certain uh, type of role, reach out to people who are doing that job in the companies that you want to work for, and just see if they have some time to connect. That you're building your network and you'd love to connect for a couple of minutes if they have the time and if they're open to it. The other thing is, with the upskilling, right? Getting involved in virtual courses and
Hmm.
roundtable conversations. And Clubhouse is a great resource for that, where you can be involved in something. And it's important that you're listening, and maybe you're going to reach out to somebody afterwards and maybe have a sideline conversation. And that's a way to build the network. But also speak up in those things and have have a seat at that table and bring your voice and your ideas and your perspective, because I think that that also can help create a new network that you necessarily didn't know it existed. So I think it's really important that in this time of virtual and remote, where people may not still feel comfortable getting together for a coffee or a hike or a walk or whatever it might be, really utilize the resources out there that can help facilitate that virtual networking environment, and attend those virtual happy hours. I know a lot of companies are doing, they've invested a lot of resources into their employee engagement experiences. And my current company, for instance, during the holidays, they do cookie baking and candle making and trivia and pumpkin painting. And it's a way to bring people together. Yes, it's all on Zoom, but it's an opportunity to see faces that you may not see or whatnot. And that could also contribute to an opportunity to network. So keep your eyes and ears open, raise your hand, speak up, ask for what you need, and practice time management.
I love that, Lisa, too. All these, great suggestions and advice. These are all great ways to keep your social skills up, your social professional skills up, because it's as much as fun as it can be for some people, it's still work. And just working on that, how you present yourself, how you interact with someone, because most of us are working remotely. I mean, this is a great way to do it in Clubhouse, especially because it's voice. It's good. It's good to practice. So I love that. Do you mind touching on, because we've touched obviously on just keeping your network alive and nurturing those relationships, kind of going back into like career advancement. Let's kind of dig in there. The pandemic hit. Who knows what was happening right before then? You could have just had your review, glowing review. You're about to get this like great promotion within the next few months, you know, maybe an increase in pay, maybe a bonus, and then COVID. Um, Most companies probably held back on doing a lot of those things just so they could keep the business running. And because we didn't know what COVID was going to do, we still don't know what COVID is going to do, but still. So let's talk about that. How long do you give a company grace and time and space to, you know, make good on those promises that were made before this really big life event for everyone? And when do you think that it's time to start looking elsewhere?
Or to just even ask the question and say, okay,
Hmm.
has everything changed? Because you deserve to know that if it has, and it may have in some cases.
And also, let's be mindful, as graceful as we're being, companies also got some really nice packages from the government to compensate for what happened. Okay, so let's just keep that in our brains too, that a lot of companies maybe even made a little money off of that situation. So I digress, but let's talk about this.
Conversations, if you're not having those conversations now, you need to um we obviously we are not out of the clear, and we're not sure what's going to happen with the Delta variant and whatever new variants come up with COVID. But what we all do know is that we all had, many of us had to transition into this remote environment. And the work was, we were expected to still do the work. And I love, Vanessa, before we started recording, you brought up, how long do you stay? This idea of being grateful that you have a job and not wanting to seem selfish and
Hmm.
this whole thing. But at the end of the day, you are still providing that service to that company. You are still working those hours. You are still busting your butt, and maybe even more so because of the transition that had happened from being in the office to a remote environment and having
Or
to.
and I just want to cut in here just a second, or feeling that you need to prove
Yes.
that
Mhm.
it's okay that you're working remote, even though we're all in it, right? But like maybe even working more to show, hey, I I'm worthy of this pay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That doesn't make you any less worthy for that promotion and that increase. And companies are, what do I keep hearing? And, and as a recruiter, I'm guilty of saying it myself, but it's the truth, is that companies are in growth mode. They are hiring, they are ramping up. And to go back to the first thing I said in this conversation, it is a candidate's market. And if you aren't being undervalued and that promotion isn't coming into play and you're not seeing that increase in pay, then I think you really need to have that serious discussion with yourself about what your long-term career vision is, map that out. And if that's not going to be in your current company, then you need to start looking elsewhere and have that conversation with your manager. Hey, several months ago, we had talked about a potential promotion. We had talked about a potential increase in responsibilities. I want to revisit that conversation and see if that still exists, and what steps should I be taking, and what is the next steps in making this happen. And come prepared with your progress, with your data, everything, and reiterate those conversations. And if somebody says to you, yeah, unfortunately we can't do that right now, that's your cue. That really is your cue. And you find that you can be appreciated elsewhere.
I
I
also
agree
just
with
want to
that.
go
And
ahead, Sue.
sorry, I was just going to say, I agree with that. And I think too, the companies that aren't going to value their employees didn't just happen because of the pandemic, right? Like you probably had
Agreed.
some warning signs. You probably had some warning signs beforehand that your career wasn't going to advance. And you probably had an inkling. And certainly if nothing's been raised about promotion and or career advancement by now, I mean, if we're really talking pre and post pandemic, there's been plenty of time for everybody to get their ducks in a row. So just be mindful of that the company that wasn't going to appreciate you before isn't going to appreciate you now. That hasn't really changed. And there are a lot of opportunities out there.
I just want to add to that don't let a company or an employer use the pandemic as a crutch, because I've personally even heard commentary of, you know, at least this person was able to keep their job in the middle of the pandemic. And how dare they even mention X, Y, and Z in the middle of a pandemic? Like almost like, again, setting themselves up as a superior in the situation, that they are giving you money. Like you're not, forget the work you're doing and contributing and all the ideas you're bringing to the table or what have you. Don't ever let an employer make you feel that way. And if they are, again, red flag, exit signs, flashing before your eyes, it's time to start putting things into motion. And again, I'm the first one to say it's scary, it's uncomfortable. It's like the last thing you want to do looking for a job. Stinks. It just stinks. Everything about it. Like is one of the, it's like moving. It's like moving to a different location, because you're moving your professional career to a different location and looking for that and preparing for that. It's work. However, for your own mental health, for your own sanity, for your own self-worth, if you're getting those red flags and those warning signals, just pay attention and listen.
Staying in a dead end job is not a better option. That is work also. So yeah, don't do it.
I recently, I think it was, I follow Mel Robbins on Instagram, and I don't know if it was her, Brene Brown posted something recently that said, gratitude has, in a sense, become toxic, right? Because you are allowed to be, you're expected to be grateful. But being grateful doesn't mean that you don't deserve these other things and you can't have these other things. You can be grateful that you still have this job, but you can still want to have that promotion. You still deserve to have that promotion. And you're talking to a yogi here who is all about gratitude. And that really stuck with me and really struck a chord inside me, because it is something to remember. It is a balance, right? But I think it's really important that, you don't have, if a company also isn't doing their due diligence, that they've promised you a promotion and knowing what everybody has gone through, over the last year and a half, and they're not making that happen and they're not advocating for you, again, self-reflection and kind of map out what that looks like for you going forward. And that's why
I
I think we're seeing the mass resignation, right?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. And I love
absolutely.
that. That hits home. And I think even regionally, right? Like, and we're in North Carolina. We're like on the cusp of like the South, and then like kind of creeping up into the Northeast a little bit. But I think depending on where you are, people expect different things of you. And gratitude, that word gratitude means different things to different people. And especially I think in the South, they hold on to that, and they don't, to your point, it's almost become toxic, where it's like, how dare that person? That's not respectful. That's not this. Not they're asking for this now. I mean, and I felt the shift. I felt that type of shift, as much as like there have been so many wonderful things that have come from our move from the West Coast. There's definitely been things that have given me pause, like, oh wow, this is landing very differently than it would in New York or in Los Angeles. And it's not me being aggressive, it's me being assertive and asking for what I want, but it's being met with a lot of resistance and almost like, how dare her? And it's very interesting that you mentioned that. And and it struck a chord with me when you mentioned it. So thank you for putting it out there.
And I think there's a difference between gratitude and self-deprecation. I think it's a very healthy thing to go through life being grateful for our opportunities and being open to welcoming more opportunities and bigger opportunities. And part of
Hmm.
gratitude is valuing yourself and being grateful for the gifts that
Yes.
you bring to the table as well. So all those things, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, just in general, for the rest of your career, I think it's important to keep that in mind. You don't want to stay in a dead-end job. You don't want to stay in a company that doesn't hold to its promises, recognizing that things change. Yeah, but there's always a way to keep and to value people in an organization, if you're the kind of organization that values those people, and you'll find a way to do it.
Hmm.
So don't be afraid to you know to keep your options open, and to value yourself as well as the opportunities that you have currently and the ones that lay ahead of you.
Absolutely.
Anything
Right.
else?
There was, one point that I thought of was this a particular leader of mine that I do reference a lot on this podcast, because she's been such a mentor to me, and she's been such she has set the bar as to what a really good leader looks like. And I know that she recently transitioned to a new company that their mission is all about helping um, upskill um, employees. And so what they do is they go into these different companies like Target and Walmart, and you may have seen a lot of this in the news, is them providing educational opportunities for their front line workers.
Mm.
Free education to be able to help them step into management and more leadership, and be able to get more skills that can help them lead to other opportunities. And I know we talk a lot about this, I think, in a professional setting. I think it might be, and this, maybe a whole other topic that we have a conversation on, is looking into what kind of resources your current organization may offer, as well as a way to potentially upskill yourself. And while you may not ever be able to utilize that in your current company, it could potentially help you, especially from a financial standpoint, help upscale you for that next step and what's part of that bigger career vision of yours.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think regardless of the reason behind a company, if the company's not going to value you and reward you, whether it's because they don't want to or they don't have the resources, it's not a great place for you to
Exactly.
stay either way. So
Yep.
thanks, Alisa. Awesome
Thank
advice as
you.
always.
Thank you.